Coronation Quiche that was recently announced hasn't been particularly well received. I know a spinach, broad bean and tarragon quiche doesn't sound particularly exciting, but follow this recipe and you'll end up with a quiche fit for a king, so they say. I did find a few problems with the original recipe, so if you just follow this one, you'll know the pitfalls of the king's quiche and how to avoid them. Alright then, to start, the pastry. I've adapted the original recipe as I am using a larger tin. This 24cm fluted tart tin with a loose bottom, so I multiplied it by about 25%. If I can find it, I'll put the link for the tin in the description below. Now add 160 grams of plain flour and a pinch of salt to a mixing bowl and add both your fats, 35 grams of diced butter and 35 grams of diced lard. You want these to be cold so it doesn't melt as you mix it in. Mix it together with your fingertips, scrunch it together and break it up over and over again until you get a breadcrumb type consistency. Once you've got it looking like this, you need to add a little milk to bind it. About 2 tablespoons will do. Mixing initially with a knife like this prevents two things: my hands becoming a sticky mess and the pastry forming too much gluten strength. Once you've done that for a minute or so, your dough won't bind any further and you'll need to move on to using your hands. You just need to bring the dough together by compacting it and lightly kneading if necessary. Eventually, you'll end up with a dough ball that you should shape into a round and then press flat into a disc. We shape it into a disc because that's going to mimic the shape of the tin that we're going to need to roll it out for. Like if this was a rectangular tin, I would press the dough into a rectangular shape to make it easier when rolling out. Now it's in a disc shape, just cling film it, pop it in the fridge for at least half an hour. In the meantime, we can prep the rest of our ingredients. We're going to wilt the spinach first. I've got 450 grams of baby spinach here in a metal bowl in my sink, which I'm going to pour a full kettle of freshly boiled water over and allow to sit for a minute or two, stirring just to make sure everything is well wilted. Now grab a colander and pour out the spinach into it, running cold water over it to cool it. This will shock the spinach and help it keep its deep green colour. This part now is integral. You will need to squeeze the spinach to get as much liquid out as you can. Do it in small handfuls at a time, as this makes it a bit easier. You could also do this with a clean tea towel where you place the spinach in the middle and twist the tea towel until the liquid comes out, but I find this way more efficient. Set your spinach aside for the moment. Now for the broad beans. I'm using frozen broad beans which just need to be defrosted and podded. You can either get them out for a few hours before you need them and leave them in the fridge to defrost, or if you leave it until the last minute, then you just need to pop them into a bowl under some running water and they'll be ready to pod within a couple of minutes. To pod them is very simple. Just squeeze between your finger and thumb at one end and the bean will pop out the other. Work your way through the beans. I find this oddly therapeutic for some reason. Let me know in the comments if you do too. If you started with about 100 grams of frozen beans, you should end up with enough for your quiche after podding, providing you don't eat too many mid-prep. Again, set your beans aside and discard the pods. Back to the pastry. Grab your pastry disc out of the fridge and your fluted tart tin. You're also going to need a rolling pin here. You could even use a wine bottle if you're desperate. Flour your worktop and your pastry and begin to roll it out. Try to mainly roll forwards and backwards and turn the pastry when it begins to lose its circular shape. When it starts to look like it is larger than the tin, place the tin on top and gauge whether it is large enough. If not, figure out where it needs a little more rolling and try again. Once it is large enough, wrap the pastry up with the rolling pin and lay it gently over your tin. It will be delicate here, so take care when doing so. Lift the drooped over edge of the pastry to allow the pastry to almost fall into place. Doing this, working your way around the whole edge of the tin until it all fits snugly in. You can tear off a piece of excess pastry to press the pastry into the side of the tin. This is sometimes a little gentler than just using your fingers. It should end up looking like this. Now put this in the fridge for at least half an hour. Next, preheat your oven to 180 degrees Celsius. That's for a fan oven. Or 360 degrees Fahrenheit if you're American. And grab your tart case out of the fridge. To trim the edges of your tart, you can use the rolling pin to roll over the tin and either do it gently so the pastry remains intact but will easily snap off after baking, or just push down completely and trim the excess pastry off. Now, rip off a square of baking parchment and scrunch it up tightly into a ball. Unfold it and place it into your tart case. Fill it with some sort of baking weight. I'm using baking beans, but you could use uncooked rice or even coins like I used to when I was a kid. Or maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe that's terrible for you, I don't know. This will prevent the tart case from puffing up when being baked. Put it in the oven for 15 minutes. This is called blind baking, to bake the tart case without its filling. Remove it from the oven and take out the baking beans. Allow it to cool in its tin on a wire rack and remove the excess trim if you haven't already. Turn the oven down to 160 degrees Celsius or 320 degrees Fahrenheit. Now for the filling. In a mixing bowl, combine 160 milliliters of milk and 220 milliliters of double cream, along with 3 whole large eggs. I used Clarence Court Burford Browns because I thought they were something to do with the Royals, but I might have just made that up. They're delicious and good quality eggs anyway, and I'd highly recommend them. Whisk the mixture to combine. Now we're going to put some chopped tarragon through this mix, about 15 grams, so grab a bunch and strip the leaves from the stems. Chop your tarragon however you'd like, throw it into your egg mixture and whisk it again. Add your seasoning, salt and pepper. I added a few good grinds of pepper and 2 to 3 pinches of Morden sea salt. Now for your cheese, cheddar is what the recipe is calling for, and that's absolutely fine, but you should maybe push the boat out a little bit here and get something nicer than the standard Cathedral City. Not that I'm trying to bash Cathedral City, I eat it regularly, but for this I recommend something of slightly higher quality. I went for a Cornish vintage reserve cheddar that I got from Waitrose that I hadn't tried before, but it was nice and strong and perfect for this quiche. Grate down 125 grams worth. You're gathering your ingredients for assembly now, so find your spinach and run a knife through it so it's in nice small chunks. With your tart tin in front of you, placed on top of a baking tray, and your fillings nearby, start by adding half of the cheese to the bottom of the quiche case in an even layer. Follow this up with your spinach. As you place it, break up any tight balls and sprinkle it evenly over the cheese. You may not need all of this spinach, so judge it by how full your tart case is. You can always use any leftovers in tomorrow's dinner. Spread the broad beans all over the top of your spinach and grab your egg mixture. Pour it over the quiche case, dispersing the mixture evenly. Add the remaining cheese to the top of the quiche and put it in your preheated oven for 20 minutes. Then turn the heat up to 180 degrees Celsius, rotate the quiche and cook for a further 10 minutes. The original recipe stated for between 20 to 25 minutes, but I was nowhere near achieving the colour that they had in their picture, even after half an hour, so I finished mine under the grill to achieve a nice golden colour. It looked and smelled pretty great in my opinion. I'm a big fan of tarragon, and the kitchen had been perfumed beautifully with it after cooking this quiche. Pop it on a wire rack for a few minutes before removing it from its tin, and leave it to cool completely, or eat it while it's still warm, as this quiche is pretty good while it's warm out of the oven. Probably better actually. Even after all of my squeezing out with the spinach, there was still a little bit of excess water that I could see at the base of the quiche. It's nothing to worry about. I just thought that could be a point where this quiche goes a little wrong. My family, friends, girlfriend, they've all quite liked it, and I think everyone was put off by the name spinach, broad bean and tarragon quiche. A lot of people I don't think associate broad beans particularly well, but I quite liked it. I thought it was tasty, and so did everyone else. So do try this quiche. It's at least worth making for the Coronation of the King. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like, subscribe for more of this content, and comment below what you want to see me whip up next. Stay hungry, my friends, and I'll catch you in the next one.